Yeah, welcome everybody. This is a talk with Chelsea Murphy, and we're talking about diversity in the outdoors today. I am super excited to have this talk. But before we get started, I'll briefly introduce myself. My name is Lindsay Keller Madsen. I am the author of a recently launched children's book called Meet the Wild, and I am super passionate about getting kids outdoors. And I think this is a very timely discussion with Chelsea, who is a writer, also a mother, and a social and environmental advocate. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself if you'd like to say anything else that you feel is important, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me, everyone here coming in and out. Like Lindsay said, my name's Chelsea Murphy, and I built a community on Instagram around advocating for racial equity and diversity in the outdoors. I live in Leavenworth, Washington, with my family, so my husband and my two kids, and we love to get outside. So I love to bike and hike and just play in the mountains with my kids. I think it's a really cool way to connect with them and also connect, with my inner child. And yeah, I'm a mother, a creator, a writer. I do some speaking and just recently working on film producing and directing. I'm really inspired by people's stories and love to just story tell through visual imagery. And yeah, I want to represent Black motherhood and what that can look like in the outdoors. And my mission is just to encourage a more inclusive and equitable outdoor community while celebrating and representing Black motherhood in the midst of a very dominant outdoor culture. And just really doing that through Instagram and speaking and connecting with my own community. Yeah, and just engaging with people like you guys.
Yeah, oh, that's such a great introduction. I feel like you really covered what I wanted to hear out of the gate of why this is so important to you. But could you tell a little bit about your story of how you started She Colors Nature and how you found yourself advocating for diversity in the outdoors?
Yeah, I always kind of like to lead with this idea of like this platform fell into my lap. And behind the scenes of She Colors Nature, again, I said is my family. And so we live in Leavenworth, and it's a predominantly white mountain town in the like central Washington state. And so for those of you who don't know, it looks like South Germany. There's just mountains everywhere, 360-degree mountains. And so my husband grew up here, and we moved here about 9 years ago. At that point, my mom would have called me, a modern day hippie, right? I love to garden and connect with nature and go to parks and different things. But at that point, in my journey and being new to motherhood, I didn't really get outside consistently. I had switched more into obviously being an adult and working, and so that brought me indoors a lot of the time. But when I moved to Leavenworth, the mountains and forests around me were very much in my face, and so the community gets outside. That's what people do here, and so with my 4-month-old at the time, I just started hiking with friends and really began growing what was a little bit of a difficult into the community here. Just me being one of the only Black women in town, and yeah, just being in this age, this space where I wanted friends but didn't really know how to find them. And so I just started hiking and getting outdoors with different people and different families. And then fast forward to about 2019, I realized, it was pretty quick that like there are stigmas around Black people in the outdoors here in Washington State. And so with me being who I am, very, I would say, extroverted and just wanting to connect with more Black moms and Black kids outdoors, I just kind of put myself out there. And it was Instagram that I chose as my platform of choice. And Yeah, just really being honest about where I was as far as being a Black mother, and wanting to encourage more connection with the outdoors, and talking about what are the barriers and why are we seeing less Black people outside. How can we make changes? What are the ways that the white outdoor community can step up and make a change? And then 2020 happened, and with us, the uprisings and the shifting of mindsets here in our country, there was just a major following of my account that happened kind of overnight. And I just kept sharing about my want to connect with other Black mothers and Black children and encourage them to get outside. Yeah, my community and my platform just kind of fell into place. And so I've just been nourishing that and really leaning into my community here in Leavenworth and continuing to get outside with my girls.
Yeah, I love that. It's not, I mean, it's not the main topic of today, but I think a lot of women, when they become mothers, there's a real shift in our focus and priorities, and we start imagining the world that we want for our kids in the future and how we might have a role in shaping that. So yeah, while I'm a Canadian mother in Denmark, which is completely different, I do certainly recognize some of that driving force that might have motivated you in those early days. You mentioned some of the current issues or challenges related to diversity in the outdoors, and I'd love to hear you describe maybe what you feel some of those major issues are before we get too far along.
Yeah, so that is a great insert for sure, just to highlight, because a lot of people don't really understand the outdoors as a privilege. And so I always like to just like open with that, and kind of inviting people to understand the outdoors and the access to the outdoors as a privilege. And so I don't speak for all Black people, and I largely have lived experiences on the West Coast. And so for me, I noticed, growing up over in Tacoma, which is, 20 minutes south of Seattle, my family, there were 5 of us, 5 kiddos in the household, and 2 parents working and just like trying to make things work. And we didn't have a lot of opportunities to get outside in the way that I am now, mountain biking and climbing and things that need a little more of like the technical gear. And I recognize that as something that is a huge privilege now. But the barriers that I would say that stood out to me just from my lived experiences are definitely, comfort being a huge one for a Black family. History tells us that we are not welcome in natural and wild spaces, and there's a lot of pain and events that are directly correlated to Black people in the outdoors. And so for a lot of people, including my parents and generations that go back very far, they connect the outdoors and the woods to pain. And so that gets passed on generation to generation. And so that right there is something that is a huge hurdle mentally for Black people to get over and recognize, like, this is something that we have to kind of take back, this access to the outdoors, and we can utilize it in a way that is positive and, for our mental health and our joy and getting through life. And then another one I would say is, a lot of Black and brown and low income communities are in urban spaces, right? In the city, and they're more of a concrete jungle lifestyle. And so just the access and your proximity to nature is huge. I get outside 30 minutes every day with my kids. It's like backyard play, or we go to a park, or we hit the trail, or we're biking. That's a huge privilege, because I'm like 5 minutes from all of these things, right? I can just hop to my car or walk to somewhere, and I'm all of a sudden in the middle of the woods. And so understanding that your proximity to nature, and your whether you have a car or transportation, any of that is going to be a huge barrier. And then I would say the last one just being finances, right? Understanding, when you think of people who go outdoors, you think of the classic, like, Harry and the Hendersons family, where they're just like decked out in all their gear. They've got their tents and their sleeping bags, and all of these things cost money. And so this idea of like being overwhelmed at first because you don't know where to start. And I think for me, a lot of it was like thrift stores have gotten me to where I need to be now. My husband and I both, putting our stuff together, and now we have a hodgepodge of really cool camp gear. But yeah, finances is a big one. Gear is not cheap. There are ways to go around it, but I would say for sure comfort is a big one for Black families and brown families. And then accessibility and your actual proximity to nature. And then finances and just understanding gear, and sometimes that being pricey and that being a hurdle in itself.
Yeah, the finance is one that really it makes sense in my head because I have four small kids, and here in Denmark, kids are outside a lot every day. It's very much part of the society, and I'm imagining, well, I'm not imagining, it is my reality, like having to, as kids grow so quickly. I mean, they're moving through sizes, especially in the first 5 years, every couple months or every season, and then if you want them to have, I think a lot about outside, and that means equipment just for rain. I mean, that's not even high tech gear, but I mean, comfort leads to utility, I guess.
Yes, functional gear, right? I think of our area, and we get all four seasons. Right now we are in the summer.
I think somebody's maybe not on mute. I wonder if I can mute. There we go. Oh, I'm so sorry. I can see somebody was on not mute, but we're good now.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So just talking about, the functionability of the gear, right? Especially for kids, like you said, we're in summer right now, and that means new swimsuits for everybody, new, Keen sandals, and we're getting life jackets fitted, and we're fitting for helmets, and like making sure our mountain bikes are ready to go. And then fall comes and it's rainy, and then winter comes and it's snow gear. And, you cross your fingers that the last year's gear fits, and it almost never does. And so unless you're like in high waters and whatnot, but yeah, it's expensive. So those are definitely the three that I would say that I have found in my lived experiences that have been a barrier. And that barrier is definitely something that we know in our country, in America, that is swayed, right? There are underserved communities that are affected more than others, but that is like Black community, brown communities, and low income white communities. I definitely want to make that clear that it extends past just me and Black people, for sure.
Yeah, and I think this point is really important because as the science, the body of research is showing how important the natural environment is for early childhood development, and then also like adult community well-being. I think this really, I hope, is shedding a light on some of these issues and bringing them to the forefront of the discussion. You have hinted at it a little bit in your previous answers, but what advice do you normally try and give for solving some of these issues or making the outdoors more accessible for BIPOC communities?
Yeah, so I think that if you're just a regular person with a family, or a single household that you've got some dogs or whatever, and you're just looking to get outside, as far as like Black, Indigenous, or people of color, my best advice would just be to get out there. Like, there are always going to be naysayers. There are always going to be, communities that maybe aren't in your court. But it's important to just know that there is so much benefit to making the outdoors and getting outside a priority for your mental, for your social, your emotional, spiritual. All of those things are benefited by getting outside. And so sometimes it's I think of it as something that's like a toss up, like, okay, maybe you might run into someone who is not accepting of you being in that space, but at the end of the day, if you can get through that incident, like, it's really important to understand that your mental health will thrive, and you'll be able to go in these spaces a lot more easy as you go. So I would say, yeah, just get out there and really just find your people also, right? Like, find your community, find good friends, find people who you're comfortable and you feel safe and brave around when you're in the outdoors, because a lot of things can happen, you never really know. And then for organizations and, nonprofits and brands, or anybody like that who is selling or communicating with the outdoor community, I would say that it's really important to just make sure that there is diversity represented on the inside and the outside, right? Within your company, within your brand, within your organization. I think that there really is no better advice that you can glean from having someone on your team, right? And I think that it's important to obviously make sure that you're making that space brave and safe for them to work and to occupy, and to have them, feel comfortable bringing things to you that maybe you've never heard before. But I think as far as the outdoor community, the organizations that I have seen do the most and the best work are the ones who are making sure that they are putting their money where their mouth is, and just making sure that they are showing the representation, not just through imagery or tokenism or anything like that, but really, putting their dollars towards making sure that there are more opportunities for Black and Brown communities, whether that's through scholarships or grants, or adding a few paid positions on your board, or whatever that looks like. I think it's important to just make sure that these people are at the table, and seen, to make sure that the inclusivity is, extended to the community that you're trying to reach.
Yeah, and is systemic within the whole body of the organization, as you said, not just the front facing part of what is being presented externally. I mean, I know that's a little tricky perhaps to evaluate, but I think you've given some really good examples of how people can look at the activity or the structure of a company to start to understand that if they want to dig a little deeper. One other thing I keep thinking about, and that I obviously as a children's book author think a lot about, is why is representation outdoors so important for children, and thinking forward about the next generation. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Yeah, beyond what you've already talked about as your girls being your inspiration.
Yeah. I would say really the only thing that I can add is just like this, being this front row eyewitness to something really beautiful that's happening in my own children. Something I think that was largely missing from my childhood, being raised, in predominantly white spaces, as far as like school and church and neighbors and all of that. So just this idea that representation can be extremely powerful, right? When you see yourself, you understand that like you can be fill in the blank, right? And so with my daughters, understanding that the outdoors is something that comes second nature to them, right? Like anything that we do outdoors, I'm seeing this like pivotal confidence in them as little girls, and I think little girls is a community that is just extremely important to continue to nurture and to uplift and to feed that into. And I think that the outdoors does that naturally, right? Like you become this like wonderfully wild woman, or little girl, and it's just like the most beautiful thing. And I think that ultimately what I'm seeing is that they would never let someone tell them that they didn't belong on a camp trip, or out backpacking or mountain biking. Like they know that they can take up space, and they do it unapologetically. And that's not something that I've had to tell them or even reinsert. That's just something that has happened naturally because they grew up in the mountains, and we go outside all the time, and they understand what gear we're using and why we're using it and how to use it. And so it's really kind of a magical thing. I think that was the one thing I was missing, knowing that I have an inherent relationship to the land and to nature, but never really seeing myself represented outdoors, through books and the people that are following me on my community on Instagram, the people that we have connected with and now meet up with. They're seeing themselves in the outdoors. They're seeing themselves through me, and they're seeing themselves through others. And yeah, it's a really powerful tool, representation, for sure.
Yeah, I watched maybe I'll link to this when I share this, but I watched a really powerful talk, maybe 10-15 minutes, by one of the employees working at Barefoot Books, and it's a children's book publishing brand, and she was speaking about the importance of representation and diversity in children's books specifically, because she said, books and storytelling are some of the very first impressions that you give to children about, what they can do and who they can be. And she said, conversely, the absence of diverse characters within the literature space, like, tells children what they cannot be or what they cannot do if they don't see themselves reflected. And I just thought that concept was so powerful, and I think extends to a lot of what you're saying about the media and representation on a broader scale. Yeah, that, again, we've slipped right into my next point, wondering about, the possibilities for us to make an impact individually is one thing, but I think at the organizational level is something that I think is worth being aware of, just because some people that may see this video are, running educational centers, preschools, or forest schools, or and what can they do practically to help this conversation?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, when I look at people in my own community that have reached out to me to, get advice from, or just like ask questions and figure out how to move forward, past 2020, past the protesting and the noise, there's so much change that can happen, which is a really cool place to be. But I would say for people in leadership, I think it's important to understand that there are established Black and Brown underserved community leaders that are already doing this work. They've been doing this work, right? I think of the Boys and Girls Clubs, the YMCAs, and a lot of organizations like them, who have leadership and representation that have been doing this work forever. And so I think partnering with people like them and uplifting the Black and Brown leaders in your communities who are already doing the work is really important. They're holding information that you may never understand because it's not your lived experience. And I think that that is irreplaceable information that you can get by just saying, hey, I want to partner with you. Hey, I want to uplift this event you're doing. Hey, can we chat for a day? Like anything like that is going to be monumental for an organization that is predominantly white. And I think that just that understanding that, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to come up with the answers. The answers are there. It's just that a lot of those people haven't been invited to the table yet, and that there are so many partnerships and possibilities that can happen. But the invitation needs to be there first. And so I think for me, a lot of the time, whenever I get like really informal invitations to things, it just feels really disenchanting. But then when I get someone who, somehow finds my email, and sends us really well thought out conversation about their goals and what they want to do and how they understand that, there are people already doing this work, it's so much more impactful to me. I'm a big feeler, and so like a lot of the time I just I need to connect, right? We're human beings, and so a lot of the time it can't be this like really raw, like, hey, I'm a business owner, I want to have business, and the end goal is money. Like as a Black woman, that just screams like all of the wrong red flags. It's much more about humanity and having missions and goals that align with the end goal of getting all people outdoors, and not just physically, but feeling safe, right, in those spaces that you've invited them in, and making sure that it's something that they want to keep coming back to. But I think an invitation is huge, and I would definitely urge most brands and organizations to understand that again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's so much and so many organizations that are Black led or Black owned that you can partner with. And so that's to me what I've been pointing people to, is just understanding that there's probably someone in your community, right, already doing this work, and you just kind of have to seek them out.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think it also perhaps takes away some of that barrier of like where to start. Where do I start having this conversation? What do I do? And to just tap into resources and people that have expertise and have, built change they want to make already in motion, like get behind and support those initiatives rather than try and build everything up from the ground up. Seems very logical also.
Definitely.
One thing I've seen in a different talk you did, there's some specific verbiage or words that you use. that I think is useful to discuss. You talk about the difference between diversity and belonging and inclusion and equity. And I want to just take a second and let you explain that and what it looks like either as a timeline or as a transition, as we talk about change and wanting a better way for all our communities.
Yeah. So, and that was, something that I had to learn upon, coming into this outdoor community and really wanting to encourage a difference, but understanding that like it's not that simple, right? Like I said earlier, we're dealing with human beings here, right? And humans have minds and hearts, and they're very hard to please at times, right? And so sometimes I think that we want to jump to the end goal of, diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? But like we skip the belonging and, what I'm working with behind the scenes of the expedition reclamation film that I'm working on, talking about what it means to have a sense of belonging and what it looks like to feel brave and safe in a space that you have been invited to, but it's new, right? It's a new invitation, and it's something that you probably wouldn't have been invited to had you not created some uproar or been a little bit rebellious, and so it's definitely something I think as far as diversity, it's, to me, it seems like very surface level, right? There's a difference between inviting someone into the room and just leaving it at that, and then inviting someone into the room and making sure they have the music that they want to listen to, the hair products they might need, the the magazines that might make them feel welcome. The list can go on and on and on, right? There's a difference between just saying like, look, we have diversity here at the table, and representing that in any marginalized community, whether that be through race or religion or LGBTQ community, often used as pawns, right? And so I think that diversity is something that's very surface level. And when you cross over into this idea of belonging, there's a lot more heart in that. There's a lot more intentionality in that. There's a lot more vulnerability. And from my end, a Black woman who gets lots of invitations, it really makes a difference in my approach as far as like whether or not I'm going to say yes to something, if the invitation is sealed with love, really, just this idea that like we don't just want you as the token Black girl. We want you to come. We want you to sit on our board. We want you to benefit from this somehow. We want you to understand that you are valuable. There's a lot more that comes from that, and I think that that's definitely what a lot of people over the last few years have been missing, is just this idea that, when we called for more representation, it was just this call for a media shift, or like, hey, let me put this Black girl in my swimsuit, and then have that on the cover. But it's more than that, right? It's when we come to the table, do we feel welcome there? Or is there a banner that says you belong here? And more than that, right? A conversation that happens and follow up afterwards. It's a lot of work, I would say. Like a lot of the organizations that are doing it right are probably tired at this point. I would imagine they might be a little bit exhausted from just the passion work, or I call it heart work. It's a lot more than just representation as far as imagery. It's definitely at the cellular level.
Yeah, I think that's and I think it's really okay. I mean, my reaction to that is that it's really okay to have a big goal, or that it requires big change to get to somewhere different. So I don't know. It's exciting to see what will come from these conversations.
Yeah, I would say like even for, new, old organizations who are getting outside, whether that's, forest schools or, kids or adults at any level, growth is good, right? You don't want to be the same organization you were in 1919. That would be like not productive, right? That our world is changing, and I think that a certain level of change and shimmy and shake is a good thing. I think that when you are bringing in more representation behind what you're doing and in front of what you're doing, I think you should take that as a win, right? When more people want to come to whatever event or buy into whatever organization that you're contributing to, I think that that is um, really telling of how well your organization is doing.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I think a lot with young kids, I think a lot about preschools and this really precious opportunity we have to influence the generations to come. I think what faster way to make a big change than to shape the minds of the kids that are growing up right now. So I think that's really exciting, and I know that the publishing world specifically there is momentum in that space, which is really exciting. I don't want to skip past expedition reclamation. I would love to hear a little bit more about that. Um, yeah, so please just talk about that project. I think it's really going to be interesting.
Yeah, so I've had a really busy last few years. 2019, another filmmaker and I got together and just started dreaming up what it would look like to start storytelling um, with Black, Indigenous, and women of color. And at that point, we were just, really hoping to get an idea of, topics around a sense of belonging in the outdoors. How do you like to get outside, or how would you like to create an outdoors that you would actually want to be a part of? What would that community look like? So this kind of rolled into the pandemic and everything as far as production and meeting with women. And so it narrowed down to 12 Black, Indigenous, and women of color, and they're all Washington State based. So we went on production and did some crowdfunding, and now we finally have a film. It's called Expedition Reclamation, and it weaves together the stories of these 12 women, and it talks about their sense of belonging, how important representation is. It talks about Indigenous knowledge and the importance of reciprocity with the land. It covers a multitude of really big topics that you don't often get when you have a predominantly white crew or characters in front of the camera and behind the camera. And so this film project is women behind the film and behind the camera. I'm one of them. I'm the co-producer on the project Expedition Reclamation. And it's just been really a beautiful journey being on this and hearing, a lot of the things that I was talking about in my storytelling and communicating on social media really be amplified by 12 other women who have had not the same experiences, but linear and similar experiences as far as their relationship to the outdoors. There are stories of reconnecting with the outdoors, and there's stories of just this idea of being, on stolen land, away from your people, your ancestors, but just being in diaspora and really trying to get back to this sense of belonging and having a place in nature, which again is inherent in all of us. But yeah, it's a great film. It's like 45 minutes long, and so it's a film documentary. And right now we are just doing screenings and panel discussions, which have been really impactful, I think, for a lot of mountain communities and organizations and that are outdoor focused. And so yeah, I'm thrilled to share it with whoever wants to see it. It's very exciting.
Yeah, is there a launch, or is there I guess I'll send some links afterwards, or I'll include them with the live. But if there's somewhere I can direct people to check it out, or get connected with I don't know if you're doing any virtual screenings, but
Yeah, so we're doing it all, and we have it all kind of set up for everyone in one place, bravespaceproject.org. And on there is a screening request form. We're about a couple months out, but for any organizations, we've had in person, we've had virtual. Some are private, some are public. We're not really saying no to anyone. We want communities who want to see it to be able to see it. And so, yeah, I would love be able to have that plug at the end of this, just to make sure people know where to go. But yeah, we're doing lots of screenings all summer long, and yeah, it just comes with like a small screening fee, and then if you want a panel, then we just talk about how to make that happen as well.
Cool. I think, yeah, I will definitely include some links or resources, but are there other resources that you like to point people to if they want to learn about more about the subject or hear? I know that you've written quite a lot on this, so people can go check that out.
Yeah, so I would say actually another fun thing that you can find on that website that I just mentioned is all 12 characters gave about 2 to 3 resources, websites, organizations, just links to things that they have learned, and organizations that are doing the work. And so that's all on bravespaceproject.org under the resource hub. And yeah, for me, I would say, you know, again, circling back to not reinventing the wheel, the organizations that I love right now that are doing really cool work that I would just like encourage people to go and check out what they're doing, find out ways to support, are definitely Outdoor Afro. I don't know if you've heard about them. They've been around for a little while, and the founder of that, her name is Rue Mapp, and she is just all about getting Black people into the outdoors and has created chapters all over the country. So that is really cool. And there's a lot of really awesome things going on there. And I'm a huge advocate for getting Black kids out swimming. And so there's an organization called Black Kids Swim. And they are just doing so much cool work with other organizations, partnering with people, encouraging Black kids to get out and swim and get swim lessons. And so, yeah, I think those are my top 2 as far as just like organizations that are doing really cool things right now. My daughter and I are actually going to a sleepaway camp in Texas this July. It's under an organization called Black Outside. And the camp is called Camp Founder Girls, and it's America's first all Black sleepaway camp. So like summer camp for Black girls. The founder way back in like the 40s wanted to get outside. The Girl Scouts wouldn't have her. And so she bought some land and created her own sleepaway camp. And it's super cool. Yeah, I'm so excited. She passed away and the camp kind of went dormant, and then Black Outside came in and revitalized the camp under their nonprofit umbrella. And so they're doing really incredible things. There's going to be 160 campers this summer going to Texas, and just like getting outside, learning all these fun outdoor things. I'm going as a counselor, my kiddo's going as a camper, and it's just going to be a really cool experience. So I would definitely add that as far as another organization.
I will definitely make a list of this also, because I bet you anything there's plenty of good reading material at a lot of these. If people just want to learn more about, as you're talking about, the history or yeah, the stories behind some of the organizations, where can people connect with you if they want to learn more about your work or on Instagram?
Yeah, so my Instagram handle is at she_colorsnature. And so you can find me there. That's probably where I'm most active right now, having a lot of fun just creating representation, right, through content and supporting brands who want to support me. And then I also have a website. It's shecolorsnature.com, where I have just some information about, you know, from how-tos to just, you know, my opinion on certain things. And yeah, I would say supporting me right now looks like definitely joining my community at She Colors Nature, and then finding out how to watch the film documentary Expedition Reclamation, for sure.
That is such a good place to end this. I think I want to be respectful of your time. If anybody has any questions, now is your moment. We can hang out for a minute. This was super informative, and I feel like I also have a number of notes to myself to check some things out afterwards. I don't see any questions popping up in the chat. Hopefully I'm not missing anything. Please email them if I've not given you enough time. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap things up here and say thank you, Chelsea, so much for your time. and for sharing all your wisdom on these issues. I think it's such an important conversation to have, and I'm glad that I'm able to create a little pocket of time where we can have it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I love obviously talking about these kinds of things and encouraging more people to think bigger, right, and to step outside of our little boxes sometimes, and just yeah, understand the importance of inclusion and racial equity, especially in a place like the outdoors. That again is something that is so free, and yeah, a place where people should feel liberated in, but hasn't always been the case for us in our country. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, we'll wrap things up. Goodbye, everybody who's here today, and I hope you enjoyed it if you catch this on the replay.